Our principal, Mr. Harris, started every morning reminding us that speaking any language except English would get us punished right away. One day, he said he caught kids plotting in Spanish, and after that teachers started roaming the halls, bathrooms, and even the parking lot listening for anything not in English. One word meant 3 days of suspension and a note on your permanent record. Mr. Harris loved to brag that English was the key to success. At home, my whole family spoke Spanish, so going all day without saying a single word and it was exhausting and nerve-wracking. My mom quit going to school events after a teacher mocked her accent in front of everyone. Kids would hang up on their parents mid-call rather than risk getting caught speaking their own language. The Puerto Rican, Vietnamese, Haitian kids, we all walked around like half people, our real voices locked away. My friend got suspended for shouting to his grandma in Spanish when she picked him up, and another lost his scholarship for swearing in French after stubbing his toe. I kept my phone hidden and on silent because my grandma, who lived with us and only spoke Spanish, had heart problems getting worse. My mom worked 40 minutes away in a warehouse, so I was the emergency contact. 2 years without suspension meant I'd mastered swallowing Spanish words before they slipped out, even when others tried to trick me into responding. I'd also learned loopholes that didn't technically break the rule. When my grandma called at lunch, I'd just say hom, and no while she talked in Spanish, making it sound like I was agreeing with someone in English nearby. When she fell once and called during passing period, I hid in a bathroom stall, whispering only yes and no while she asked questions, scared someone might hear me. I used our code. 3 taps meant take your medicine. 4 meant call mom. It took 15 minutes to confirm she was okay, without saying a real word, and I was late to chemistry, but at least not suspended. I thought I could keep surviving until graduation. My grandma knew about the rule and only called for real emergencies, but sometimes she forgot. We even had a plan where our neighbor would text first if it was serious, so I could step off school grounds to call back. But emergencies don't care about your plans. During history class, my phone buzzed 12 times in my pocket before I peeked under the desk. My neighbor only used that number for grandma's emergencies and had never called more than twice. My hand shook as missed calls hit 20, then 25. When the teacher turned to the board, I slipped out and called back. My neighbor was yelling in Spanish that my grandma had collapsed and could barely breathe. She couldn't tell the paramedics the name of my grandma's heart medicine, and they had no clue what she meant. The drug had a long name that sounded a lot like the one she was allergic to, and in her panic, my neighbor kept mixing them up. I tried using our tapping code, but she was crying too hard to get it. I tried texting the medication name, but she couldn't show the screen to the paramedics while holding the phone to her ear. There wasn't a clever fix this time. My grandma was dying, and I had to pick between saving her and keeping my place at this school. I sprinted down the empty hallway toward the doors, talking fast in Spanish, telling exactly where the medicine was. In the bathroom cabinet, 3rd shelf, behind the vitamins, white bottle, not the blue one. My neighbor put me on speaker so I could talk to the paramedics, but they didn't know Spanish either, so I was translating like crazy, switching between languages as I ran to my car, trying to explain the heart meds and her deadly penicillin allergy, then switching back to call my neighbor who kept asking if she was going to die. I was so focused on saying everything right that I didn't see Principal Harris standing by the front entrance, watching me use the banned language that could save my grandma's life. He was recording me with his phone, his face totally blank. She lived because the paramedics knew not to give her the wrong medication. The doctor said the info I translated saved her life, that the wrong drug would have killed her in minutes. The next morning I walked into first period and saw Principal Harris sitting at my teacher's desk, with his laptop open. The room was silent. He turned the screen toward me, showing hallway footage with clear audio of me speaking fast Spanish on my phone. "Would you like to explain?" he asked, pulling out a suspension form with my name already filled in. "Why, you thought you were exempt from our English-only policy." My legs felt like they were made of cement. Everyone stared while he tapped the form with my name written in black ink. My mouth was dry like I'd swallowed sand. He wasn't really asking anything. He was putting on a show for everyone else. The video kept looping, showing me running with the phone to my ear. My hands shook when I tried to talk. My grandma was dying, and the paramedics didn't know which medicine would kill her. Mr. Harris raised his hand to stop me before I could explain more. "Emergencies don't override school policy. You could have found another way." His voice stayed calm, but his eyes treated me like just another issue to check off a list. The suspension slip sat on the desk between us, already sealing my fate before I even stepped in. "Can I call my mom to explain what's going on?" He slowly shook his head. "She'll need to speak English during school hours or bring an approved interpreter." The whole class shifted awkwardly, but no one said a word. Even asking for help had rules. My hands trembled as I shoved my phone back in my pocket. Mr. Harris opened his drawer and pulled out a thick stack of papers covered in yellow highlighter. He slid it toward me. "Your disciplinary hearing is set for Thursday at 10 a.m. You may bring a parent or guardian, but everything will be in English only." The bell rang and everyone bolted, pretending not to see me. Eyes stayed glued to screens or floors as they rushed past. Mr. Harris packed his laptop and left, and I just stood there with that packet in my hands. By the time I forced myself to move, the hallway was already full of kids heading to second period. Whispers followed me like bees buzzing in my ears. Some kids texted while looking right at me. Others joked loud enough for me to hear about getting sent to Spanish jail. My face burned, but I kept walking, pretending I didn't care. The weight of everything pressed on my chest, stealing my breath. Before I reached my next class, the office secretary showed up and told me to come with her. She led me into the admin office and pointed to a hard plastic chair by the window. "You're excused from classes today, but you have to stay here until dismissal." The fluorescent lights hummed above, making my head pound. I pulled out my phone to text my neighbor about my grandma, asking if she was okay after yesterday's emergency. The thought of her alone made my stomach twist. The secretary handed me a form, telling me to write my official statement about what happened. The blank lines glared back at me. Nothing I wrote sounded right in formal English. I kept starting over, each grammar mistake feeling like proof of something worse than speaking Spanish. The secretary just watched, offering nothing. Her eyes followed my pen as I crossed out another line and started again. The words refused to fit. After my fifth try, I asked if I could get Mr. Harris's hallway recording. She didn't even look up. That's internal evidence. Students can't access it. My stomach dropped like I'd fallen off a cliff. They had evidence I couldn't even process or respond to right. The unfairness made my jaw lock so hard my teeth ached. A student sitting across from me leaned in and whispered that the hallway cameras actually recorded audio. I hadn't known that before. My mind started spinning as I pulled out a notebook and jotted down exact times and spots, trying to remember who else had been in that hallway when I ran past. Maybe someone else saw how panicked I looked. Maybe they heard me crying. Interesting conversation going on here. I wondered what they were really thinking. The other student got called into the counselor's office before I could ask more. My phone buzzed with a text from a friend, saying people were already talking. They were claiming I broke the rule on purpose to make some political point. The rumor was spreading faster than I could fix it. More texts came in asking if I was trying to be some kind of hero, or if I just wanted attention. My stomach twisted at how messed up the story was getting. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but nothing I could type would change it. I shut off my phone alerts and shoved it deep into my backpack. The secretary kept typing while I sat there with a half-finished statement form in my lap. The wall clock ticked so slowly it felt broken. Other students passed the window, staring like I was some zoo exhibit. A few pointed and whispered. The form sat mostly blank because nothing I wrote could explain what really happened. How could I put into perfect English that my grandma's life mattered more than their dumb rule? My phone buzzed again. My neighbor texted that my grandma was stable but weak and kept asking for me in Spanish. The relief hit so hard I had to grab the desk. Then guilt followed because I should have been with her instead of trapped in that stupid office. She probably didn't get why I wasn't home yet, and that made my chest ache. I pushed the form back across the desk and signed, and walked out as the secretary yelled that I couldn't leave without permission. The halls were empty during class, my footsteps echoing as I went to grab my stuff. A note taped to my locker said I had an appointment tomorrow morning with Orlando Fry, some counselor who worked with bilingual students in situations like this. Maybe someone here actually understood, but I wasn't counting on it. That night, while Mom and I tried to eat dinner, an email popped up with the official hearing info. 3-day suspension, permanent record note, and review of my enrollment. My hands went cold reading those last words because they could actually kick me out of school for this. Mom looked over my shoulder, her face draining of color as she grabbed my hand and held it tight. The next morning, I showed up early for my meeting with Orlando Fry, this quiet guy with glasses who actually listened instead of lecturing. He said the school had broad authority, but might be violating district anti-discrimination policies with its English-only rule. He couldn't promise anything, but gave me a list of what to record and how to use it for the hearing. His office felt safer than anywhere else in that school had felt in 2 years. At lunch, I sat in my car and called the hospital, asking if they could send letters from the ER doctor and paramedics explaining how my translation stopped a fatal medication mistake. The administrator said she'd try, but it could take a few days to get everything on official letterhead with signatures. I wrote down her name and direct number just in case. My phone blew up with notifications because someone posted about my story online, and suddenly everyone had an opinion. Half the comments said, "Rules are rules," and I knew what was coming. The rest said, "Saving a life matters more than any stupid policy." The noise made me dizzy, so I deleted the apps. I didn't want to be anyone's political symbol. After chemistry, my teacher asked me to stay, and when the room cleared, she quietly said the rule felt wrong, but teachers could get fired for questioning it. She showed me a page in the student handbook where the district's own non-discrimination policy contradicted the English-only rule. Her hands shook a little as she showed me where to find it online and told me to make copies. That night, a man named Ruben Guidry from a legal aid group called after my mom reached out for help. He said Title VI protects language minorities, but schools often claim safety exceptions to dodge it. Any federal complaint would take months, way past graduation, so the system moves slower than real life. The next morning, I went to the office to ask for a Spanish interpreter for my hearing, since my mom struggled with formal English. The secretary said they only provided interpreters for special education meetings, not disciplinary ones, so I wrote her exact words down. Mike Fair, the assistant principal, pulled me aside and told me to just take Saturday detention instead of dragging this out. He looked worn out, like he'd said the same thing to 100 kids before and already knew how it would end. For a second, I thought about it, but then I remember my grandmother's face when no one could understand her. I told him thanks but no thanks and walked to class. The rest of the week crawled by with teachers giving me strange looks and kids whispering when I passed. Some kids tried messing with me by speaking Spanish, just to see if I'd slip up and get in more trouble. I kept quiet, head down, counting every day until the hearing. Grandma called twice, but I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't risk anyone hearing me speak Spanish on campus again. Mom took time off work she couldn't afford to help me get ready. Flipping through the handbook and printing everything Orlando told us to. We stayed up late sorting documents and practicing what I'd say in English, even though it felt messed up having to explain in English why speaking Spanish saved someone's life. The morning of the hearing, my stomach hurt so bad I could barely eat, but Mom made me try anyway. My phone buzzed while I was packing my papers. An email from the scholarship committee saying they'd be reviewing disciplinary records before final decisions. My hands went numb reading they'd check mine next week. This wasn't just about missing 3 days anymore. 4 years of straight A's and perfect attendance could mean nothing if that suspension hit. I shoved my phone away, grabbed my backpack, trying not to think about college disappearing just because I spoke Spanish to save Grandma. The hearing was at 2, but first I had to survive a full school day. At lunch, Mom texted that Grandma was out of the hospital but needed constant care and meds every 4 hours. I spent lunch setting alarms and texting our neighbor to check in. The chem test was tomorrow and I hadn't studied at all. Everything felt like it was collapsing at once. During study hall, Ruben emailed saying recording hallway audio might break state privacy laws, but courts usually sided with schools for safety. Every argument had a loophole protecting them. The whole system felt rigged. Then a classmate I barely knew texted me a shaky video. Principal Harris at the entrance, using his personal phone to record me during my emergency call. That wasn't an accident. He'd been waiting for me to mess up. I sent the video to Orlando right away, hand shaking with rage. That night, I stayed up building a timeline of everything. Orlando came over and helped me write every timestamp, every detail. He kept crossing out parts where I wrote how I felt, making me stick to facts only. Times, places, who said what, who was there. No feelings, no opinions, just hard evidence no one could twist. Weirdly, doing it helped me calm down a bit. The next day at lunch, I moved quietly through the cafeteria, asking the Vietnamese and Haitian kids what they thought about the language rule. Most didn't want to talk, but a few slipped me anonymous notes. One girl lost her National Honor Society spot after answering her mom's call in Vietnamese. A Haitian boy said his parents stopped coming to his games because they were scared they'd accidentally speak French. More stories kept coming, all saying the same thing. Fear and missed chances. After school, I gathered more notes, and the picture got even worse. That night, I sat at my laptop and wrote a formal complaint to the district. I mentioned discrimination and denial of interpreter rights, using all the legal stuff Orlando had taught me. My hand shook as I attached every file and hit send. No turning back. I was now on their radar as a problem student. The next morning, Principal Harris was suddenly everywhere. He stood by my locker. He passed through the cafeteria right when I sat down. He even hung around near the bathroom when I went there. Every time I spotted him, I texted Orlando the time and place, logging everything. It felt like I couldn't breathe, like the school itself was closing in on me. During lunch, my phone buzzed. Mom was calling. School cared more about catching kids speaking Spanish than actually teaching chemistry. Priorities so twisted. They should win medals for it. Her boss had told her if she missed one more day for meetings, he'd cut her hours. We needed every cent she earned to pay for Grandma's new meds. I told her not to go anymore, but she refused. She said she wouldn't let me go through this alone, no matter what it cost. Before chemistry class, my chest got so tight I couldn't breathe right. The room spun, and I grabbed the desk to keep from falling. The nurse said it was a panic attack and asked if I wanted to call someone. I sat there shaking, too afraid to speak Spanish, even to calm myself down. They'd made me scared of my own voice, of the words I'd known all my life. That night after Mom got home, Ruben called and spent an hour explaining our options. He kept saying we needed to send a formal notice to the district's legal office about Title VI violations. It had to do with discrimination based on where you're from. He wrote a draft while we were still on the phone, reading parts out loud, so we could understand before signing. The legal words were hard to follow, but Mom nodded and took notes on the back of an envelope. Ruben told us that going public might actually backfire since the school could double down to prove a point. Every move felt like stepping on a landmine. The district replied to my interpreter request the next morning, sending a 3-paragraph email full of polished nonsense. They said they'd review the policy but couldn't assign an interpreter for the hearing, basically telling me too bad. I went through it with a highlighter, marking every empty phrase that didn't commit to anything. It felt like the system's whole goal was to make people too tired to keep pushing back. I spent the afternoon rehearsing my statement, recording myself on my phone again and again. The medical terms came out in Spanish first since that's how I'd learned them helping my grandma with her pills. I had to stop myself and say cardiac medication instead of medicina cardiaca, my tongue heavy and awkward. My mouth felt like it was turning against me, failing when I needed it to work. The morning before the hearing, an email from the hospital popped up with an attachment. The doctor who treated my grandma had written a short note on official letterhead, saying my translation had stopped a medication error that could have killed her. Seeing his signature made it hit different. It was proof I'd saved her life, something solid I could hold like armor. Over lunch, I met a classmate I trusted to go over anonymous statements from other families. Parents wrote about kids getting suspended for answering calls in their first language or missing important family news because they were scared to pick up at school. We practiced reading them out loud, keeping our voices calm and faces blank so no one could guess who they belonged to. It felt like we were building more than a case. We were building a movement. That afternoon, Orlando said we should CC the district equity officer on everything. He said it would help if things went legal. I spent an hour scanning every file, every email, every bit of proof that this was bigger than me. The pile kept growing. Then Mike Fair showed up at my house with what he called a final offer. If I signed a paper promising not to talk about the policy, they'd drop my suspension down to detention. The paper sat on the kitchen table while he said this would make everything disappear, that I could move on clean. For a moment, I almost picked up the pen because I was exhausted, but signing meant silence while others still got hurt. I told him no and watched him close his briefcase, looking let down. My phone started buzzing nonstop with messages from classmates who'd heard about the hearing and wanted to plan a walkout to back me up. They were ready to risk their records and scholarships to defend what was right. But I couldn't let that happen. I kept texting them not to risk getting suspended or losing their futures because of me. This was my battle to finish, and I wasn't going to pull anyone else into it. That night, my grandma sat with me in the kitchen, not fully understanding why everyone was so tense, but sensing something serious was happening. She told me in Spanish to tell the truth tomorrow, even if it cost me everything. That truth mattered more than their rules. I wrote her words in English on an index card to read at the hearing, her voice still giving me strength through the translation. Family meant more than any policy they could invent. The next morning, I stood in the same bathroom stall where I used to tap secret codes to avoid speaking Spanish, the same one I'd hidden in so many times to dodge their rules. Staring at my reflection in the scratched mirror above the sink, I decided I was done pretending. Tomorrow at the hearing, I'd speak clearly in English about why both languages made me who I am, why taking one away felt like losing half my heart. The choice gave me this weird peace, like setting down something heavy I'd been carrying too long. Morning came too fast with my alarm blaring at 6:30. I texted Orlando to make sure he was still coming and got a thumbs up emoji back. My hands trembled as I made coffee and tried to eat toast that tasted like cardboard. The stack of printed papers sat on the kitchen table next to the hospital letter and the anonymous statements from other families. Mom came out of her room dressed in her best work outfit, the one she wore for conferences. She looked over the papers and nodded, then started cooking eggs even though neither of us wanted food. Orlando showed up at 7:45, wearing a button-up shirt I'd never seen before. We reviewed the plan again while Mom listened and asked about who'd be there. I told her about Mike Fair being the student advocate and how the district would send a rep too. Orlando practiced medical words in English just in case he had to translate something. My phone rang while we were going over notes. It was my neighbor asking if my grandma should take her morning meds with food. I told her clearly in English that the white pills were with breakfast. The pink one was for bedtime. The words flowed naturally when I wasn't worried about being judged. After I hung up, Orlando said I sounded totally different when I wasn't scared of breaking some rule. Mom squeezed my shoulder and we gathered all the papers. I made 2 copies of everything in case they tried to keep the originals. The walk to school felt longer than usual, with Mom by my side and Orlando trailing behind. Other students stared as we walked by, but I kept my eyes straight ahead. The secretary at the front desk looked surprised to see us and pointed toward the conference room down the hall. The door was open, and I could already see the long table inside. Principal Harris sat at the head, laptop open, with a stack of folders next to him. Mike Fair was on his left with a yellow legal pad and pen. Across from Mike sat a woman I didn't recognize, wearing a district badge around her neck. The teacher representative turned out to be my 10th grade English teacher, who gave me a small nod as we walked in. There was no interpreter, even though I'd asked for one in my grievance form. Orlando sat behind me, while Mom took the seat to my right. The room smelled like coffee and printer paper. Principal Harris didn't look up from his laptop for almost a minute after we sat. When he finally did, his face was blank, like we were talking about attendance instead of my future. He turned his laptop toward me and hit play on a security clip. The hallway footage showed me running, phone to my ear, talking fast as I switched between languages. The audio was clear enough to catch every Spanish word I said to my neighbor and the paramedics. He let it run for 3 minutes before stopping it and pulling out a suspension form already printed with my name. He said the footage proved clear defiance of the school's English-only policy. I kept my voice calm and confirmed that, yes, I'd spoken Spanish in the hallway that day. I explained my grandmother's heart condition, the medication confusion, and how the paramedics needed exact details to save her. My hands shook under the table, but I pressed them flat on my thighs. Principal Harris jotted something on the form while I spoke. I slid the hospital letter across the table toward the district representative. She read it carefully, but Principal Harris said it didn't matter since I'd broken a rule. He said rules existed for a reason, and exceptions would weaken the system. The district woman asked to keep the letter and made notes on her tablet. I handed her a stack of anonymous statements from Vietnamese and Haitian families, explaining how the rule affected them. The way she practiced saying cardiac medication instead of medicina cardiaca showed how our minds store knowledge differently in different languages. How does forcing someone to translate medical terms they only know in Spanish help anyone? One family missed a funeral because they couldn't arrange childcare without using their language. Another child wet himself because he was too scared to ask for the bathroom in Vietnamese after forgetting the English word. The district woman's eyebrows lifted as she read through the pages. Principal Harris's jaw clenched tighter with every page she flipped. Mike Fair asked if I had any extra paperwork, and I handed over screenshots of the state education codes about language access. Mom's phone started ringing, and she fumbled to put on speaker when Mike suggested she could share more about her family situation. Her English came out broken as she tried to talk about working long hours at the warehouse and my grandma living with us. When she stumbled on a word, Orlando leaned in and whispered it, and I said it louder so everyone could understand. Mom explained how she'd miss school events because teachers mocked her accent and how she constantly worried I'd get suspended for taking care of my grandma. Her voice cracked when she said she was proud of me for saving her, even if it got me in trouble. The district lady started typing faster while Mom spoke. Mike cleared his throat and said if I dropped the complaint, they could cut my suspension down to 1 day instead of 3. I shook my head and said I wanted the policy reviewed, not a lighter punishment. I kept my tone calm but didn't back down when he said I was being unreasonable. Principal Harris said I was being stubborn and that actions have consequences. The district lady looked between them before saying maybe they should hold off on discipline until the district reviewed its language access policy. Harris's face went red as he said school decisions didn't need district approval for normal discipline. She reminded him civil rights cases follow a different process. They argued in polite, official words while my future just floated there between them. After another hour, they finally made a call. The district lady typed something on her laptop while Harris sat with his arms crossed, fuming. She turned the screen toward me showing the decision. 1 day of in-school suspension starting tomorrow. My record marked under review, and the district would examine its interpreter rules for emergencies. It wasn't a win or a loss, just something in the middle that nobody liked. I signed the paper without saying anything because there was nothing left to say. The next morning, I showed up to the tiny room by the main office where suspended kids sat. 3 desks faced the wall, no windows. I did worksheets, missing my chemistry lab that counted for 10% of my grade. My teacher had already said no makeups, so my A dropped AB just like that. During lunch, I ate alone in that same room while the monitor watched from her desk. A few kids passed by on their way to the cafeteria. Some nodded through the window, others whispered and pointed. One girl mouthed that I had it easy, while another just shook her head like I'd stirred up drama for no reason. Sitting there with my sandwich getting soggy, I started realizing what it was going to cost socially. That night, I went straight to my grandma's room where she was chilling in her recliner, eyes glued to her Spanish soap. She asked about school, and I just said it was fine, then sat down on the floor beside her, leaning against her chair. We watched together in silence, not mentioning what happened at the hearing, because she didn't need to know what speaking Spanish had cost me there. She ran her fingers through my hair like she used to when I was a kid, and we stayed like that, quietly sharing a kind of peace that didn't need words. 3 days later, my mom forwarded me an email from the district saying they were starting some kind of review on language access. That week in the halls felt off. Conversations stopped when I walked by, and a few teachers looked uneasy, like they thought I might report them. My English teacher, who used to joke with me, suddenly kept everything super formal. Being right about the rule didn't mean anyone wanted me around. 2 weeks after the hearing, A memo came out making an emergency exception for language use in medical or safety cases, and schools had to allow interpreters for parent meetings. Principal Harris called an assembly to explain it, saying the rule only applied to real emergencies, and normal communication still had to stay in English. He read it all from the paper, twisting it as much as he could, but it was still something. The scholarship committee emailed me that they were holding off their decision until my record cleared, so I was stuck not knowing if I'd have college money or not. I kept sending them weekly updates about grades and projects, never saying suspension, just trying to show I was still working hard while they reviewed everything. Waiting for that answer felt like its own punishment. I couldn't plan anything without knowing about that scholarship. I wrote an op-ed for the school paper about what it's like to walk around half-voiced, not able to speak your own language. I talked about how words feel trapped in your throat, how you have to translate your thoughts before you can even speak, without naming names or mentioning the suspension. When it got published, other students came up to me quietly, saying it said exactly what they felt. The Vietnamese kid from math showed me his copy with lines highlighted, and the Haitian girl from band told me she sent it to her parents. Writing felt safer than talking in halls where people could snitch. The last week of school, I passed Principal Harris on my way to history. We didn't say anything, but we didn't look away either. I kept walking, still cautious with my words, but not quiet about what mattered. The fight wasn't over, but I was still standing, and sometimes that's enough to keep the spark alive. Thanks for being here while I sort through all this. It's been wild thinking this through together. Until next time, like the video. It really helps. What I learned from all this is that standing up for what's right doesn't always make you popular. Sometimes it just makes you stronger. Speaking up, even when your voice shakes, is better than staying quiet and pretending everything's fine. I realize that silence can protect others' comfort, but it can also destroy your own peace. If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed quiet to fit in, or spoken out knowing it might cost you everything? I really want to hear your thoughts. Every story matters, every opinion counts. God bless you all, and may you always have the courage to use your voice.